This is Twit.
I love the take on, we used to think in previous decades that 2000 was really futuristic. There was a lot of stuff with the word 2000 in it, or stories about 2000. And then we got there.
It's almost 20 years ago.
Right. We got there and it's like, oh, it's a little different. There's these advancements, but our lives, the way that things work, the fact that cars still move around on the ground and aren't flying around. We didn't get a lot of the stuff we were promised in science fiction in the 1940s and 50s. And of all, so the joke is basically we should have picked 3000 because we could still be looking forward to this stuff. Like 3000 is so far off. None of us are going to be alive then. But 2000, we've seen it. And it's funny because Blade Runner, of course, the classic 1982 sci-fi sort of noir movie,
right,
it takes place in Los Angeles in 2019. So, yeah, in 1982, that seemed like a long way off. And there are flying cars and all of this new technology. And there are replicants who are essentially almost like organic androids that have been created that are so close to the real thing. It takes a trained Blade Runner, a trained officer to identify them using special equipment. And anyway, if you've seen the movie, if you're a fan of Blade Runner at all, you probably are into that world, that gritty noir world of their interpretation of Los Angeles in 2019. And it was directed by Ridley Scott. It has absolutely amazing cinematography and lighting, and it's just a brilliant movie, in my opinion. Of course, stars Harrison Ford. There was a game, and it was an ambitious undertaking. Westwood Studios, you may know them from like the Command & Conquer series. They basically, internally, they pitched the idea to management, like, can we make a Blade Runner game? And this was in the 1990s.
Right.
And they got approval to do it. It was very ambitious. They had to actually invent some technology to make this work. They were targeting, I want to say it was like a Pentium 90 computer as the minimum system requirements. Actually right here in front of me. Yeah, 90 megahertz Pentium. So they actually created something that had pretty dazzling visuals for the time. They had some interesting techniques they used to have like character models actually accurately reflect lighting. And if your character passes through fog or steam, they would be enveloped by it during their travel through it. And they came up with technology to actually make that work and work on pretty low-end hardware in 1997. Mm-hmm. And the game, unfortunately, was not a DOS game. 1997, this was the Windows era. It was a Windows 95 PC CD-ROM game. And for the longest time...
very early in the evolution of that platform.
Yeah. And for the longest time, just no one could get it to run. I found a copy of this first when I was out thrifting years ago for $5, got excited about it, brought it home. I couldn't get it working on anything. And I jumped through hoops. I read about stuff. It was famously difficult to get working unless you had old hardware to run it on. And then in October of this year, the people behind Scum VM, and Scum is an acronym. I can't remember what it stands for right now, but it was the programming language that Lucasfilm developed for their early adventure games. Right. And it was the MM at the end I know stands for Maniac Mansion. It's like the scripting language for Maniac Mansion. And a lot of adventure games from LucasArts were programmed using that language, and the Scum VM was a platform that allowed you to run those old games on modern hardware. And it's platform agnostic. It runs on everything. It's on Android. It's on Linux, Mac OS, Windows. And that team, apparently big fans of Blade Runner, they put in all the work to create compatibility just for this one specific Windows game. When Scum VM typically it's hosting DOS games that use a specific type of programming language. And then all of a sudden, version, I think it was 2.21 or 2.10, it was called Electric Sheep, and it supported Blade Runner as the only Windows game that it supports. It was just crazy to me. And I actually went through all the steps of copying over my 4 CD-ROMs and just the files that it said I had to have in this one folder, and then point Scum VM to this folder and get it running. And it worked. But now GOG.com, which is formerly known as Good Old Games, the website that sells these DRM-free, old, basically ready to install, pre-patched, old games that they have the rights to. They obtained the rights. So it's I guess it's not surprising that you can actually buy this now and play it on modern computers because of the work that the Scum VM team put in. But it's kind of crazy to me. Like, this was in legal limbo for almost 2 decades. This was a game that a lot of people thought would just never work again unless you had some retro hardware up and running and had access to the original CD-ROMs. So for about $10, you can buy this now. And visually, it's a lot more impressive than I would have expected given its age. You play a lot of these older, like DOS era games, and they look really, really chunky and pixelated on a big monitor. I was playing this on a bigger monitor. And yeah, I mean, it's lower resolution. Anything VGA on a modern, like, high resolution panel is going to look low resolution, but it scales up pretty well. And the lighting effects and the music and the dialogue, the excellent voice acting. There are moments where if you weren't paying attention, you would think you were kind of in the film. That's the whole purpose of the development of this game, was to kind of, it's not replaying the movie. It's not the same thing. It's in the same universe and it takes place at the same time, but this is a side story. And what's cool about it is it's actually randomized. That's one of the things that Westwood Studios did, was it's almost infinite replay value, because who is and is not a replicant as you go around as a Blade Runner working for that same department that Harrison Ford's Deckard character did. You don't know who is and isn't. And it literally changes every time you restart and begin a new game. So you actually have to follow the clues and, you know, figure things out again every time. So I haven't played through the whole game yet, but it's very impressive in these early stages. And I'm just happy that it's available again.
So it shockingly and delightfully, it sounds like you were delighted and not disappointed by the experience.
No, yeah. Like, the fact that everything just instantly worked was kind of amazing. And then I was being really picky. I was checking for like sync, like on the cutscenes. I had initially when I was playing around with Scum VM, I had some sync problems if I was using Mac OS and that weren't there on Windows. But the video sync seems to be working properly, like the lip syncing up to the video. No graphical artifacts, nothing like that. So it seems to be pretty polished at this point for something that's only been supported since October.
Sounds pretty awesome.